Hi there, my name is Mr. Knight and I'm the Head of Department of Geography at Fitzwymark, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why I think geography is a great subject and you might want to choose it for your GCSE studies. So do you know what all of these people have got in common? It's not a trick question, and it's not that they study geography at school. It's that they've all actually got a geography degree. Now, I'm not saying that they all use their degree every day in all of their daily practices, or that it necessarily led to their positions, but they have all studied geography, and I'm sure it has been helpful at some stage of their lives. So I think one of the most important ones of note there is Theresa May, the second female Prime Minister of the UK. Or Anita Roddick is the founder of the Body Shop, or Prince William, who studied geography at Oxford. And there's many more people out there who are behind the scenes working away and have gained a huge amount of skills through studying geography. But it's not just the skills that people gain through studying geography. I do think the skills are important, and I think field work is important as well, which I'll talk about later. But I really think it's the subject matter which is most important and most interesting about geography, because it's around us everywhere. Geography is it's the study of people and the study of places. Really, that is fundamentally what life is about and what makes the world go round. So, for example, everything you see on the news, and I know most subjects can say this to an extent, but a lot of the most important news stories we see are rooted firmly in geography and parts of our geography syllabus. For example, the trade war that Trump started with China just before everything became overshadowed by the COVID pandemic. But then even the spread of the pandemic itself, what did we see in the news? We saw maps of the spreading of the virus. We saw graphs, which we analyze all the time in geography. Trump was calling it, the Chinese Kung Fu virus. So I'm not just going to get hung up on Trump here, but climate change is in our news constantly. Our government are now spending huge amounts of money trying to convert our resources to a much more sustainable stock. Last year, about 50% of our energy came from renewable resources. So news stories, whenever you turn them on, there seems to be a key geographical story. And I think to myself, oh, I should post that on the department Twitter page for the A-level students, because there's just so many relevant stories out there which are part of the geography course. You'll never get bored in a way if you're interested in the world and you're interested in the news and what's around you. Because look, the physical environment, Unit 1, is made up of natural disasters, whether it's a tsunami, a storm, flooding just through prolonged flooding, or damage to the ecosystems that you may see on a David Attenborough documentary, or news about the decline of bees and the loss of biodiversity being just as much as a catastrophe as climate change. It's there staring in your face every day if you're reading the newspapers. And then we've got our human geography in Unit 2. So population, as a result of the COVID pandemic, I've just been seeing articles that now we may be seeing a population world decline by the end of the century, a lot quicker than we thought, and how damaging that may be. We see stories about migration constantly and Brexit. So, I mean, Brexit was a geographer's field day in analysing the pros and the cons of the Brexit decision. I won't get into my own personal views on that. Globalization, which is one of the three kind of underpinning concepts of 21st century geography. Globalization is everywhere around us, and it's a big part of the human Unit 2 part of this specification. So if you think about everything that is made, if you look around your houses where you're watching this video, probably your laptop you're watching this video on was made outside of the UK and was made by foreign companies. Globalization has shaped the world that we are living in today and the world that we know. So understanding how it works and how it developed and its pros and cons, I think, is incredibly important. Resources and resource management. We have a finite amount of non-renewable fossil fuels. They're dwindling away quickly, and we need to stop using them for the environmental reasons around those. And then Unit 3, geographical skills and issues. So geographical skills is really actually part of each unit we study, but it's also embedded strongly into Unit 3, as well as current issues. So we look at a pre-release booklet, and you're assessed on your knowledge of fieldwork. So I mentioned a moment ago about the kind of underpinning concepts and pillars of 21st century geography. I mentioned globalization, but another really key concept is sustainability. And this concept runs throughout the entire course and is embedded into each unit because it is so important. So global ecosystems, we look at hot desert environments and we look at tropical rainforests in more depth, but then we also look at woodland ecosystems closer to home. And we usually have the opportunity to go out to Hockley Woods and study that ecosystem face to face. We look at what ecosystems are, how they vary across the world, and then we look at how humans are impacting on those environments. Hot deserts and tropical rainforests are our case studies, but we do look at just the general mechanics of how humans are affecting ecosystems and how small changes that we have can can build up over time and build up on a global scale to leave us in a position now where the Earth's very future is kind of threatened, you know, in terms of food production because of the damage to the natural ecosystems that we've caused. Global hazards. So again, sustainability in terms of sea level changes are going to be a big problem for many places around the world, but even in the UK. So, you know, Canvey Island, for example, is threatened there. So we need to look at, it's not just studying a volcano for the sake of studying a volcano. It's about looking at how we can manage these threats that are here. They've always been here to an extent, but they are increasing now because of climate change, with the exception of tectonics. But even so, because of population pressure, more and more of the human race have been forced to live in areas at risk. So in a way, you know, the threat even from volcanoes and earthquakes is increasing as well. So, and then finally, landscape. So we focus on rivers and we focus on coasts. Yes, we look at that classic Oxbow Lake formation that most parents will remember. It's often the only thing people remember from geography. They remember a lot more, but you've just forgotten it all. But basically, yeah, rivers, coasts, how stacks are formed, how cliffs are formed, how beaches are formed, how sand dunes are formed. We look at all the physical geography, the mechanics of how these things are created, the processes, erosion, deposition, longshore drift, all of the mechanical, purely physical elements. But then we look at, again, human management of these natural landscapes. So, you know, how are we going to cope with river flooding in the future, and how are we going to cope with coastal flooding and coastal erosion in the future? You've only got to go on holiday to Walton-on-Menaze to see the effect that big storms are having on our more unconsolidated sort of cliff material, and a lot of our coastlines are just crumbling into the sea. You can see here on the slide just a piece of work that some students created on a case study of Typhoon Haiyan, where they had to learn. One part of the specification is learning about how a hurricane forms. So they've done a bird's eye view of a hurricane, and then they've also presented onto their piece of work the primary and secondary impacts and responses to that hurricane. On the next slide, which I won't talk over, you can see another example where they have done it from a different viewpoint and tried to show the scale and a kind of side-on cross profile of the hurricane. Okay, so the second unit is the human unit, challenges in the human environment. And you'll see there again, there's this strong theme on challenges. Geography is no longer just about studying farming for the sake of studying farming. It's adventurous and current and relevant because we're looking at how humans, how we are affecting our world around us. And unfortunately, there's a lot of us. So we are now challenging our natural resources. So urban issues and challenges. In this unit, we look at everything from greenfield sites to brownfield developments and kind of NIMBYism, not in my backyard kind of viewpoints, to the development of housing. We look at mega cities, we look at squatter settlements, we look at the management techniques that governments are employing to try and deal with urban problems and urban issues, from everything from resettlements of people in squatter towns to just developing better water systems and sustainable transport systems. Economic development. So this is really where we look at things like population pyramids and the development, what development really is. So that it's more than just being rich and poor. It's about people's social development. So people's quality of life and how that varies, not just between countries, but between different areas of countries. So we really start to look at the third kind of overall principle of 21st century geography, which is inequality, because you haven't got to look far to see social inequalities around us. Even in towns like Rayleigh, on a local scale, that inequalities exist. If you go from one side of London to the other on the central line, there are differences in life expectancy. If you look at the difference between the north and the south of the country, which the government were trying to address before the pandemic hit, there's a massive inequality between the north and the south of the UK. So we take an unbiased, balanced look at these inequalities and try to work out why they exist, and we look at how we can manage them and what the government are doing in the future and what needs to be done to manage these inequalities. And the third part of this unit is resource management. So I've mentioned this before, but obviously we're running out of fossil fuels and it's becoming more expensive to mine them. So we need to change to a more viable, greener future. So this unit is looking at water, it's looking at food, and it's looking at energy provision, which, I mean, what can be more important than that? To understand how this is gonna, how we're gonna deal with these changes, how we're going to afford these changes, and how we're going to implement the changes that we need to in order to secure a sustainable future on our planet. So on this slide here, you can see some print screens that I've taken of a piece of work that a student produced last year. So we run the GCSE over 2 years, or we will be starting in September 2021. There is a lot of content to learn in this geography specification. If you're happy to read and you enjoy it and you're interested in it, then it won't be a problem for you. Because as I said earlier, you will know a lot of what you're learning about vaguely from just having awareness of the news around you and what's happening around you. But we do need to utilize that summer holiday between year 10 and 11. So we will be setting a summer project. Now this student really went to town on this piece of work and produced 42 pages. And you get a lot of guidance explaining what you need to do. And you'll get resources in order to complete it. And obviously, depending on your target level, there'll be a different expectation of how much you hand in, but you will need to be prepared to do a significant amount of independent work outside of lessons. And, you know, we're not going to be giving you projects every holiday. And, you know, this student, they chose to produce this huge amount of work, but you will be expected to complete homework regularly. Not just as skills development and not just for the sake of setting your homework, but because there's a lot of content to learn. And in order for us to have time to revise thoroughly in the second year of the GCSE course, you're going to need to be working at home on a regular basis. So the last part of the GCSE paper is, or the third paper, is called Geographical Skills and Issues. And you get a pre-release booklet given to you in the spring before the final exam. Now we will analyse that as a class. We will prepare you for it by breaking down every keyword, making sure you have a good understanding of the key themes within that booklet. We will analyse the graphs and statistics and facts beforehand, so that any question that comes up on it, you will have probably already practiced a similar question. So we've got quite a lot of experience as a team of teachers of knowing what kind of questions can be asked. So we will analyse that booklet and kind of preempt the questions that are going to come up. The second part of this unit is fieldwork skills. So you will go on your own fieldwork, which I'll mention in a moment in more detail. So you'll go on your own fieldwork trip and carry out your own fieldwork investigation and answer questions directly on your own investigation. but you will also be assessed on your knowledge of fieldwork as a whole. So you will be kind of like posed scenarios that other students were in on a field trip, and you might be asked to sort of look at their results and decide what average would be the best average to use to get a good understanding of the center point of their data. Or does their methodology sound fair? Or does the questionnaire that's being used here sound like it's going to gather biased results or unbiased results? So it's asking you on your understanding of fieldwork, of a trip you've been on, but also of generic fieldwork. So now I've told you a little bit about what's in the course itself. I just want to talk to you about how it can actually help you really and develop you academically. So one, you will become a good communicator because we do presentation work in geography. We also do group work. So, you know, we're aware that if you're not really in favour of public speaking, we won't force you to do too many presentations to the whole class, but we will encourage you to present your findings, decision-making activities, and research presentations between groups and within groups. You'll learn to work well as an individual and part of the team because the field work requires you to work in a group. Depending on your class, we will either put you into groups or let you decide on groups. It all depends on the mechanics of the class and who's in the class really. Problem solving is a key part of geography. So some of the questions ask you to come up with a solution. They may give you choices, or they may ask you to come up with, for example, you may see a map of a river valley, and you might be asked to use your understanding to explain the best way to actually defend this stretch of river using a range of hard and soft engineering techniques that you've been taught. Developing empathy for other people, because we're looking at inequalities. It's about breaking apart kind of stereotypes that you may already have and didn't even know that you had about people. And understanding, like migrants, for example, why are economic migrants actually migrating to the UK? Students in year 9 have already sometimes built up their own kind of viewpoints, right or wrongly. We don't tell you what to think, but we encourage you to develop empathy for other people and to really analyze and evaluate people's reasons for doing things. Now, geography is full of transferable skills. So maths, we will go up to the level of working out percentage increases and decreases. We'll look at medians, means, modes, different types of central tendencies. We'll be looking at composite line graphs, histograms, scatter graphs, statistics like interquartile ranges. Now, we'll coach you through those because I'm not the strongest mathematician myself. I'm a geographer, not a maths teacher. So I know how hard and daunting teaching maths can be and learning mathematical skills can be. But if you practice them enough, none of the skills that you need to master in this geography GCSE are, I don't think, too difficult to master. And, you know, a lot of the questions you get asked will have multiple choice answers to support you through them. Now, also, geography will help you because it will bring together your studies of science, English, maths, even history as well. And then later on, if you study something like economics or business studies as well, geography really helps you to see why the things that you're looking at in your other subjects are actually relevant in a way. So if you're learning something in maths, like you're learning interquartile ranges and box plots and thinking, oh, why am I doing this? How am I ever going to use it? Well, then in geography, you may be analysing your fieldwork data, and then you may use that skill that you've learned in another subject. And the same in science. So in biology, if you're learning about photosynthesis and cell respiration and thinking, well, I'm never going to need this, well, in geography, you will. So geography is a subject that really brings together the other subjects. At GCSE geography, we would consider it an academic subject, so it's part of the EBAC, and there is quite a lot of writing involved in it. So you will be expected to write, and there is speller and grammar and punctuation, so we will encourage you to develop those skills throughout the GCSE. and it's also a well-respected subject. It's a facilitating subject, and it's preferred by a lot of the top universities. So if you go on and do it as an A-level, it's going to look good on your academic CV because it is a hard academic subject. It brings together evaluative skills, critical thinking, description, explanation, and then analytical skills, and of course mathematical skills. And spatial skills in mapping, which you will only look at really, I suppose, in geography, maybe in design technology to an extent. But we offer a range of skills that you won't see such a broad breadth of skills in any other subject, I think, and some of those skills like the mapping, ordnance survey work, and yeah, some of the analytical resource skills that we use, I think you probably won't find in any other subjects at all. So geography can take you anywhere really, from an architect to a town planner, a social worker, a housing developer. I'm not going to read the whole list, but it will give you skills that will complement any of those professions in front of you, and many more, because of the range of skills. So not only will you have very good critical thinking and evaluative skills, it may help you if you end up being a solicitor or a lawyer. You're also going to understand about ecosystems. So it's going to help you as a landscape gardener in choosing which plants will go where in a garden. So very, very useful to complement other subjects. You may choose to leave geography after your GCSE studies, but without a doubt, whichever A-levels you choose to move on to, or BTEC course, there will be, you will have picked up skills within geography that will benefit that subject because it is so broad. It's like a really good bridging subject to take you into other areas, especially if you're not quite sure exactly which direction you want to go. Because we've got the mathematical skills, you're not going to kind of shut the door on a route of study in the future, so to speak. So it's an EBAC subject, and you're gonna learn to write, and you will have to do extended written answers, but at the same time you've still got the mathematical element in there that can take you into a different pathway, whether or not you want to do something more vocational or you want to go down the further education route. In the long run, because of that versatile range of skills that you develop, it enables you to branch out into many different directions. So therefore, in terms of employment, it's been said and stated in a few articles that I've read that geographers actually end up having a higher chance of getting a job, and they often outperform other subjects in terms of employment rates. Now, these are just a few employers that would be looking for geography graduates or encourage you to have a geography A-level. So if you study that list of logos there, you'll see that there's a huge range of organisations there that appreciate the value of geography. So what kind of support is available in our subject? There is a lot of content to learn. I've said that before. You need to show independent learning skills. Revision is really important on a regular basis. The more subject knowledge you've got from reading around the topic on a regular basis, the better. But even so, you're going to need to learn case studies, you're going to need to learn specific examples, because there will be corners of the kind of specification that you don't find quite as interesting, like in any subject. So you're going to need support in order to learn those topics, because you're not just going to remember it from a lesson you had in year 10, and the notes in your exercise book may not always cover the content as securely as you would like, because you may have been busy learning and doing a learning activity rather than making notes. So the support we will give you include a textbook in year 11. You may be able to get those earlier now at the end of year 10, depending on how many we've got in stock. But we offer you straight away an electronic textbook as a PDF, which is available on SharePoint. Now, we've also got access to a really good website called Cool Geography, which is the same as the PDF electronic textbook, but it's all mapped out and laid out on a website format which you can access anywhere on your phone. There's also many GCSE pod videos to support you out there, and we will give you a huge amount of resources. Well, we already have. They're available on SharePoint, so you can go on there and have a look at these in the Key Stage 4 section. So there are knowledge organisers, which are like revision summaries of each unit, all laid out. It's a big double-sided PowerPoint slide of a key summary of all the keywords and all the key facts that you need to learn. So if you printed those out or just had them saved on your phone in a folder as PDFs, you can just revise from those really easily. Now, as well as that, we like to give you lots of vocabulary exercises. So there is a whole range of Excel documents that you can use with all of the keywords and key vocabulary mapped out with kind of learning activities, fill in the blanks, etc., and then testing activities for you to use. There are past papers on SharePoint, and there are also what we call PLC, personal learning check sheets. So there are detailed lists of every single part of the specification that you need to learn. So you can use those to go through and traffic light, red, green, amber, the areas that you're not sure about, and make sure that you study those and learn those ready for the test. As well as that, we've got access to the Educate quizzing platform, which we use to test you, and you can then go back and retest yourself on knowledge. And those questions are mainly designed to test your knowledge and your interpretation of resources. We've also got a lot of content on Quizlet, which is another electronic learning platform that you can use to set yourself multiple choice tests and play match up and scatter games, matching up definitions to keywords to help learn the content. We do run regular practice of exam technique within, I would say, every lesson. We practice exam technique very early in geography, so that if anything, we can kind of speed up the amount of content we cover in year 11 as you become a more sophisticated learner. So we teach you the skills early on in year 10, and then you're able to, for example, carry out that project over the summer between year 10 and 11. We have also run, we haven't this year because for obvious reasons, pandemic, but we have in the past 2 years run a mentor scheme. So we've taken some promising year 12s, or not promising, but really good, strong geographers in year 12 who have then worked with targeted students in year 11 to help build up and boost their skills. And it pays off for both students to take part in that scheme. We also try and give a lot of model answers. So we copy and paste model answers and then sort of show those off in lessons so you can see how to improve your own answers. Okay, so the exam structure, I've mentioned it loosely before, but it's based on 3 papers. So each one is an hour and a half, and it's worth 35% for the first 2 each, and then 30% for the final paper. There is no coursework now in any GCSE subject, but you do get the pre-release booklet that will support you in paper 3. Here's an example of a past paper. So you get given a resource, and the first question is about you analysing this resource, which shows the tracks of different intensity hurricanes. It looks quite straightforward, and if you've revised hard and you know your content, then it should be fairly straightforward. The second question is, again, just knowledge recall. So, following the multiple choice or gap filling questions and single mark answer questions, there will usually be a 4-marker question and then usually a 6-marker, maybe 2 4-markers and 1 6-marker or 2 6-markers. This question is asking you to use evidence. So it's asking you to use examples you've already learned to justify this statement. So this is an example I've taken from a student's work from Microsoft Teams that they completed in lockdown a few weeks ago. And you can see there, if you scan through this, that they have given a couple of examples about extreme weather, and they've talked about why the weather is becoming more extreme, because it's becoming either more intense or more frequent. And then at the end, they've referred to a graph that they've used in the lesson, and they've clearly recorded their notes on that graph and then actually learnt that and used that in this question. So you don't have to write a huge amount, but you do need to write in a certain way for a 6-mark question. Usually kind of 2 to 3 good point evidence explanations, 2 to 3 good points as long as they're fully explained in evidence, will be enough for a 6-mark question. So here's quite a tricky question that requires you to use your knowledge and understanding of how hurricanes behave to forecast the weather conditions in New Orleans. And you've got to be careful that you don't just start writing about everything you know about hurricanes, because everything you say has to be based and pinned on the evidence in the photograph. Now, the longest questions you get given are 9-mark questions, and there will be spelling, grammar and punctuation on the final question of each paper. Now, in this question, you have to choose either of these figures. Now, we teach earthquakes rather than volcanoes. And then using figure 5A and an example, we will teach you about the Chile earthquake and Nepal earthquake. You have to discuss or assess the primary effects. Are they more significant than the secondary effects? So, for example, the primary effects of the earthquake will be the buildings collapsing and killing people. And then the secondary effects would be the fact that there isn't a good supply of fresh water anymore because all the pipes have broken, and therefore there could be a cholera outbreak. So you'd have to weigh up how many deaths there were from the primary impacts of this, and then discuss whether or not that's going to be worse than the following secondary impact or effect. And you'd be expected to make maybe 2 or 3 good comparisons and discussions about these primary and secondary effects, referring to what you can see in the picture and referring to your case study knowledge. And the marks come, 3 of the marks come from your knowledge of earthquakes, 3 of the marks come from you explaining your answer, and 3 of the marks come from you being able to really kind of evaluate and assess and critically analyze which types of effects are worse. But that's it. That's the longest question you would get. You'd be expected to be spending about 12 minutes or so writing an answer like that. And if you've engaged with geography in year 9 this year, you will have already written longer answers like that in the lessons and been expected to write longer answers. So there's nothing that's going to kind of jump out of the GCSE that you haven't already done in year 9 and been exposed to this year. It's just about being consistent and making sure that you revise everything, because you can be asked a question on anything that you've learned over the 2-year period. We carry out fieldwork twice in the GCSE, once at the start of year 10. At the moment we're going to Hockley Woods, and then at the end of year 10 we go to Stratford to complete an urban study. It's a really important part of geography because it allows you to go out and actually test hypotheses just like you would in science, or answer a research aim, and to really find things out yourself following a structured line of inquiry. It's not just about finding out the information though, it's also about broadening your horizons. It's also about seeing things in the field with a hands-on approach that you wouldn't get simply from learning them from a textbook. Just in the way that you carry out practicals in science in a laboratory where you've got more of a controlled environment, in geography we like to go out into the world where we can see the places and see the processes that we are trying to learn about and explain and analyze up close and personal. Okay, so I can make absolutely no promises whatsoever about this at this stage, but my colleague is exploring the possibility of running a trip to Iceland, possibly in 2022, but much more likely to be in 2023 because of the costs involved in the fundraising that would need to take place. It would be offered probably to year 11 and year 12 students. To be honest, I'm not sure exactly of the logistics yet and the time framing, because all planning has kind of been put on hold a little bit at the moment. But there is a possibility, if you took A-level geography, that this trip could be available to you in the future, if you took GCSE geography as a starting point now, of course. Okay, so thank you for listening. Hopefully now that's answered a lot of your questions about the GCSE course. If you have any more questions, feel free to email me. My email address is knight@fitzweimar.com. You can read these little quotes yourselves, and on the next slide is a video from a Year 12 student, completely uncoerced, giving you his honest opinion about our subject. Thank you for listening.